Welcome to the Marvel Cinematic University podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Canton III, and we are continuing our coverage of the Star Wars series, The ACOLYTE, Episode 6, Teach slash Corrupt. But I gotta tell you, you know what's not corrupt? The MC University Patreon, patreon.com/MC University Pod, where you could get our bonus content, such as a subscriber mailbag that we released earlier today. Shout out to Alexis for joining us for that one. If you are a Avengers level patron, which is $8, you would have the opportunity to join us on a future subscriber mailbag. And of course, we got a lot of bonus things coming in July. Should be very, very fun. Looking forward to doing Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, amongst other things that we have cooked up for later in the month. But let me introduce my pal, my cohort, my compadre, the super producer Jake Christie. Jake, how are you?
I'm doing well. I am thinking what it would look like if we were corrupt. Like the idea of a corrupt Patreon. That's just a funny idea for me, and I'm not going to go down the road because I don't want to dissuade people to joining. But a
Mm-hmm.
corrupt Patreon is a funny idea to me.
Yes, it is. And as you see Jake's smiling face, just a reminder, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like, follow, and comment. So now let's talk about this episode. So I was thinking, after last week, and we got all the lightsabers, and we got all the deaths, and we got everything else, we knew this would be a come down episode. So it was always going to be interesting how they chose to follow this. What I think they did in terms of separating the characters and obviously separating the twins is we got two very different schools of thought and how to deal with people. And I gotta tell you, I want to start with Kamir and Osha because this guy, Kamir, is an excellent evil man. I approve of all of the way he decides to go about his business.
Mm,
Um, the dark side, you gotta. It's like he desires and manipulation and all of those things. I love what that whole not only conversation but everything that we saw between the two of them looked like in this episode, pushing Osha ever so closer to the edge of the dark side. So Jake, give me your perspective on what you saw between the two of them in this episode.
I think that the thing that he's doing, which is so, you know, special to her as someone who's previously interacted with the Jedi, is that like he's just kind of meeting her where she is in a certain way, and like not pushing anything onto her. And I think that she's kind of thrown off, that she expects when she like confronts him about all these different things, she expects him to be defensive or and to like, argue and to, you know, explain in a bunch of big words why it was actually right. But no, he kind of just, either gives a short explanation or lets her fill in the. It just he very clearly is trying to seduce her
Mm-hmm.
to the dark side, and he's not overplaying it at all. And so, like, you as a viewer, I think, are seduced a little bit because what he is saying is much more appealing, in my opinion. Like, just generally as a way to live life than like, yes, you must follow these very strict rules, never have any feelings, like it's. I think the thing that was really important that they kind of underlined is that, like, because it's a thing that I think that they kind of do a bad job of dealing with in the actual movies. Not a bad job, but I think it's a thing that like they kind of say, but they don't really get through. Is like it is actually kind of a huge problem that the Jedi require a lack of emotion, like at a certain level, and I think that is the fact. The fact that that is what Kamir is selling is, you know, that's all he really needs to sell
Yeah.
because that's clearly what the impasse was with Osha the whole time.
I love vulnerability. I think vulnerability in heroes and in this case, even the villains of the story can provide such a coloring of what something can look like. And I thought that what Kamir did, and just in terms of, and Headland talked about this in an interview with a former guest of the show, Maggie Lovett,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that she talked about like just him being naked, like
Mm-hmm.
walking into the river. which got a lot of people going last night. Um,
Understandably so. It actually was kind of it was ludicrous actually. Um,
the horny. You know, it's funny. Funny about like Star Wars fans and I think nerds in general. Like God bless them, but guys, we gotta have more sex, y'all. Like seriously, like it's just like we ain't. It's not like y'all saw like some dangalang or something. Y'all just saw some arms and some back,
I mean, the
and
thing
I'm saying,
I think that there's a certain type of viewer where like that combined with his vibe might as well be pornography. I think that that's the thing.
I
Like
got you.
I think that yeah. I think it's more than just that. I don't think that like just as a if you just showed stills, I think it's part of the vibe. But I yeah.
I was just thinking of because everybody wanted to kind of go crazy about the Game of Thrones from the past this past week with Homeboy just out there in the buff and whatnot, and folks was talking about that too. But I mean I do get your point as far as like the appeal aspect, but uh, besides that digression, I think that point of the vulnerability and allowing yourself to be seen, and
Mhm.
to your point, not overplaying the hand, just stating out the facts of the situation as much as he can possibly do. And I think the way that he presents himself in this case could not be any other way than how he did after what occurred in episode 5.
Mhm.
So it allows it kind of like puts Osha on her heels a little bit
Mhm.
because she's expecting this like really cold-hearted killer, and
Mhm.
what she gets instead is a person who had there's a method to the madness,
Mhm.
and there are just some there's just some very pointed dialogue, I think, when Osha talks about leaving the Jedi,
Mhm.
and he reinforces the fact that not only she was sent away, it's like,
Mhm.
why are you so focused on helping these people? Why do
Yeah.
you care about Soul so much? Seems like these folks betrayed you. Seems
Mhm.
like also that these folks at any given opportunity, when he refers to Yord,
Mhm.
and the fact that he was very quick to just arrest her and take
Mhm.
her back and all of those things, it's like putting those little seeds of doubt, which she probably already felt already, but felt like it was the right thing to do in terms
Mhm.
of how her mentality was. I think was a really a great way to twist the knife in the back per se, and get her to a point where by the end of the episode she's basically on the border of making a different decision with her life, and like you said, as far as like the viewer is concerned, you feel almost like, well, damn,
Mhm.
I can't really complain about
Yeah.
it, you know?
And I think the thing that um is I think really interesting, and they pointed out even obviously like is that you know Kamir brings up the fact the problem that he had with May was that the only thing she was seeking was revenge, right? And I think that if you go back to episode 3 when you see them as children, how we discussed how as children it would seem make more sense for Osha to be the one to go to the dark side because she's the one who doesn't follow the rules and all that. And I think that this is coming back to that. It's like, yeah, on some level May is not trying to dismantle all the systems and trying to
Right.
break the rules and all that. If she has an anger in her, it's she's trying to do a specific thing or two. Whereas Osha definitely has it in her to want to play outside the lines and to fight back again. So in the same way that like as a child when she's being raised by witches, breaking the rules is to become a Jedi. As an adult, when she was, cast away by the Jedi, breaking the rules is to become a Sith. That she clearly has a much better aptitude for it, and I think the thing that's very interesting that both in the writing and the way that Manny Jacinto plays it is like, I think from the moment she wakes up, he's feeling like, oh, Osha more is a better candidate than May was. Like, I think he immediately feels that way.
Yes, yes. And let's talk about Manny Jacinto for a second, because right now I'm pretty over the moon
Yeah.
with his presentation, with how he has portrayed himself.
Mm-hmm.
This character has really, so far, and it's like you get a chance to kind of look back at the beginning episodes, and
Mm-hmm.
I think folks online, like the real nerds, like will post clips of how he was talking to Osha and
Mm-hmm.
May in those first couple of episodes so playfully and so different, and then now you see that this character now, it really is. I think it's a testament to the way that they've laid out the story so far, and it's also a testament to the actor to be able to get this stuff over. And, considering what the situation
Yeah.
has brought on. So, I mean, I don't know if there's any beats on his performance that you want to hit, but I
Yeah.
gotta say, I'm pretty damn impressed with what
I
he's doing right
I
now.
think that his performance is a real testament to the power of underplaying things, because I think that like it's a pretty common thing for people playing villains to say that villains don't think that they're villains. Um, but I think that like it's I think hard. I think it's very risky, and so actors don't want to do it to just kind of be casual in a way about evil, like because even obviously he makes good points, etc. But he did, kill a child. So like I'm not
Hmm.
gonna. So I think that there's a way that like I think it is incredibly risky to underplay a character like this, and because if it doesn't work, it's like, is this guy asleep? You know what I mean? Like we've all seen a movie where a guy makes a decision to underplay something, and you're like, this is not the wavelength. This didn't work.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think the fact that it just really feels like too like the performance is really perfectly synced up with the rest of the writing and all that. And if you read any of the stuff from Leslie Headland, talking about the series, it's really clear that like this. I mean, it was like such a very very collaborative process. So like I can
Hmm.
imagine, like even if the character I would not be surprised if the character was written a little bit more, expressively,
Yeah.
and they took stuff out. And actually, I do want to bring up a thing that I saw in an interview. I don't know if it was one with Maggie, where apparently when Manny Jacinto was like giving notes on the costume, it was his decision to make his outfit sleeveless. So the man knew he knew
Hey,
he knew
salute to him.
he
Like
knew
he
the gains that
really,
he got,
yeah,
and he wanted to
yeah.
show them off.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And I think as we kind of dive in a little further to what
But can I
this
actually say,
story.
I realized I said a joke. Can I actually say the interesting part of that, the reason he
Yes,
did
yes,
that
yes. Please,
is because he
please.
wanted to be like, the point he was making was like, if this guy doesn't expect to be hit, why would he wear armor? Like, if you think like why, and I think that is a very interesting choice of like, oh yeah, this guy's dressed like this because he thinks you don't wear armor if you don't think you're gonna get hit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a level of and it's not even necessarily cockiness. I think it's
No.
just a level of supreme confidence in their abilities, and this is what he's talking about as far as the freedom,
Mm-hmm.
as it is to go against the forces of the light side and the Jedi. From a story perspective, a lot has been discussed about the when it comes to Sith Lords, the rule of two,
Mm-hmm.
and how that goes. It's pretty clear that Kamir is an apprentice,
Mm-hmm.
and we have not seen his master yet.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, obviously, Kamir is looking for his acolyte, and clearly Osha is going to be that subject. I think it seems like he wants to turn from apprentice to master.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea that I get from here. What interests you about this story and Kamir's aspirations in not only trying to turn Osha, but also trying to advance himself? Because
Yeah.
that seems to be the greater function of what the last two episodes will serve.
Yeah, I think that like I think I'm interested in it insofar as it reveals more about his character and his past. I think that like the rigidity or like the stuff that type those rules of Star Wars is frankly the stuff I've always been least interested in Star Wars. Um, I mean, and that's just a person. Any like fantasy where it's like always inevitably or always will come down to the same thing. Like that kind of makes me roll my eyes. But I think that the interesting thing about it is the fact that he says it out loud to me, like
Mhm.
that it's not like he's like, no, I want an acolyte because that means that I will be. And obviously, in a way, you think about how much he hates Jedi for their systems, but he's thinking about how like just having an acolyte would make him more like, why does that is the guy? It's just the thing, of course, is that we all have systems. No
Right.
one's really free of systems, and so I'm interested in that regard, and I think that I'm interested in his past, and I know we can talk about this in terms of him related to the Jedi. So, like,
Yes, we can.
I'm interested to see who his master is insofar as how they got him away from the Jedi, or where they found him, and how that led to the man we see before us today.
So what we know, at least so far, is he mentions to Soul in the last
Mm.
episode. It's like we have met before. This
Mhm.
isn't the first time that we have met. Now I'm guessing Kamir was a very much younger Padawan, and based off of the scars on his back,
Mhm.
my guess, and I feel like it's not too crazy, it's not a lot, it's
No.
not a big ass leap, is that Vernestra
Yeah.
was his
Yeah.
trainer, was his master. So this leads me to Vernestra's. We'll leave Soul and
Yeah.
May
I
for
will say
last.
also, I think
Yes.
that what you're saying about like it, with the scars and stuff, I think that a lot of people, and I know we've discussed this before, have been kind of broken mentally with the way that TV is like guessing, predicting, and spoiler stuff. It's like I think people are kind of like, oh my god, they're telegraphing it. His scars, like they're not telegraphing it. It's storytelling. You're supposed to be able to put this together yourself. Like it's
No, I'm
that's the thing I really like about the show. And I know you're not saying that, but I
yeah,
really
yeah.
like. We're like, yeah, it's not bad storytelling that you can kind of put that together. That's storytelling.
I was just about to say, like, after episode 5, Leslie had an interview with Entertainment Weekly, and I believe she has said that we not that we were painted into a corner, but just the idea of, huh, it's kind of obvious that this person is the villain of the
Yeah.
show. So instead of trying to do too much to mask that,
Yes.
let's make this character impactful and let's tell the story through the
Yeah.
character beats as
Mhm.
opposed to the plot stuff that we always talk about with all of these shows and movies
Yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah.
And it was obviously episode 5 was incredibly effective in
Yeah.
its storytelling, which allows it to build further into this. But as far as Vernestra is concerned, so we see a couple of interesting things from her in
Mhm.
this episode. The Everything that we've seen so far from her has led us to believe that she is hiding something.
Mhm.
Now in this episode, it is clear that one, she will do anything to keep the Senate out of the Jedi's business,
Mhm.
and this has become a more complicated thing. And then obviously, as she goes to investigate the deaths that happened due to Kamir's involvement,
Mhm.
pretty clear that she is I don't know, for lack of a better term, she's kind of playing both sides to a degree. There's a
Yeah.
little bit of a darkness to her to a degree in the way that she just kind of like
Mhm.
decides to blame Soul for the
Yeah.
deaths. This is an interesting turn, and I've been saying it throughout all these episodes. I want to see where her story meets with everybody else who's left, because where that goes from here should be
Mhm.
pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I think that she's kind of such an interesting character because, like, the key to everyone, all the nerds wetting themselves about like how did the Jedi not know the Sith were back? They say that there have been Sith, and it's like the whatever the explanation of how the Jedi did not know there were Sith. The key is Vernestra. She did. She has to have done something. So that's made her character interesting this whole time. Where it's like you can tell that she is the reason why this is not knowledge that's passed down to the
Hmm.
Jedi. But I think the thing that's so great about the scene where she's looking at all the bodies and her assistant, I forget his name, is kind of being befuddled, and basically being like, is this a rogue Jedi, or is
Yeah.
that she knows who it is, because she knows who is. She's like, huh, there's one person who's evil who fights like this and who is not a Jedi. So it's like, I know who it is. And so, like, she is stuck between, like, do I reveal probably some mistake I made that, like, undermines the Jedi, that is, like, a huge fucking problem for us? Or do I blame a really good person who's been nothing but good to me? And you can tell that she's really leaning towards the latter because, like, this whole story is about protecting how, even if you the moral rot that comes about, the decisions you have to make, that once you decide that in order to protect an institution that you think is good, you're
Hmm.
willing to make immoral decisions, that slippery slope never stops. You're going to have to keep making worse and worse decisions. Like, once you decide that anything's on the table, anything's on the table.
Sounds familiar with what we're going through in today's world.
Yeah.
Topical.
Yes.
But yes, I think. That is such a wonderful way to tell a story. And I think what the last two episodes will probably give us, in a sense, is I'm guessing we're going to go back to the past and we're going to see exactly what occurred and what happened there. And then once we get that reveal of what Vernestra has done and did, it will give us a nice canvas of what we will look forward to close out this season, because I feel like this show does not end here.
No.
It feels like this is kind of like a long-term proposition, which I like, because it's nice to get some TV like this where
Hmm.
you feel like there's a continuation, and also like I've now gravitated to the story and the characters enough
Hmm.
where it's like I kind of want to see more and where this goes.
Yeah.
But yes, Vernestra, I just love when old dude was like, "Hey man, you know what? Don't worry about it. Ain't a big deal. But we
Mm-hmm.
gonna have to do this investigation. We gonna have to do this probe." And
Mm-hmm.
she had that look on her face, like, "Goddamn, I know what's gonna happen."
Yeah. And she's out here, she's getting car sick and going to hyperspace. Real.
Oh
Oof.
my goodness, yes, yes. I can't wait to see what's next for her. But yes, we also have the Soul and May
Hmm.
situation, as Saul seems very guilty, very
Hmm.
conflicted, very incredibly emotional about everything that occurred with Kamir on the planet, and May is just trying to, well, May first she was trying to kill Soul,
Yeah.
but then on top of that, whatever she was trying to do, like in terms of subterfuge, on the ship, and until it kind of felt that Soul had figured it out
Yeah.
relatively quickly,
I think he knew basically the whole time, but for most of the time.
and just kind of like wanted to play it out and see what
Mm.
happened.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing and the most
Mm.
important thing from all of the hijinks that occurred there
Mhm.
is that Soul is ready to talk about what
Yeah.
occurred on that planet, and it's just him talking. You're gonna have to listen in this case,
Mhm.
is what he tells her. Uh, I'm interested to see more of Soul, like this person is seems like he seems like at his core a really good person
Mhm.
who was involved in something bad, and seems like he made a bad decision that has kind of like cost years of people's lives.
Yeah. And I think that like I'm choosing to read it as that he knew most of the time that it was May. I think
Hmm.
at the very he definitely knew by the time they had the conversation about like when May was like, "How else am I supposed to feel about that?" Like at that point, he definitely knew it was her. Just because that's just not May does a really because May didn't know OSHA as an adult and all. She does a really bad impression of OSHA.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the reason I choose to read it that way is because I think his decision not to do anything says a lot about him. That like he has no desire to kill May. That he is he's so sympathetic towards her. He wants to, and I think he wants to like kind of figure out what is what is she doing? What is like let her go through the motions of pretending to be OSHA and hopefully get an idea of what's going on. And I think when he realizes that she's not on the level and is probably going to try to hijack the ship or stop them from get contact with the Jedi, then
Yeah.
she he knocks her out. But I think that watching the scenes between them with the idea that he knows that it's May, I think makes him even more tragic because the things he's saying to her, like, you know, he means to both of them. Like, and I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, I think that, it was really powerful stuff. Honestly, he really is playing like he's like a really broken dude in a way that is not like cool or interesting. It's not like, oh my god, this guy's so interesting, moody. It's like no, he's like really did something that really
No,
broke him.
he's sad,
Yeah,
and I feel and honestly, I feel sad for him.
yeah,
It's like I want to know what he went through, and the fact that it's kind of like he's getting betrayed left and right,
hmm,
and I'm sure he'll have to confront Vernestra at some point, and then the real tragedy that is about to occur is possibly losing Osha to the dark side.
hmm,
That's a difficult thing. And then what will become of him then?
hmm,
That's I think at this point this show has laid out Soul as an emotional person
hmm,
very well this entire time, And I think the fact that they have not gone away from that at any point
Mm-hmm.
leads me to believe that there's a possibility that he could even be
Yeah.
he could even succumb to it.
At the
I think
very least, I can imagine him walking away from the Jedi. Period. I mean, actually, would be surprised if it doesn't end that way in some way. If he doesn't die.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think because there's so much more to come in the Star Wars timeline
Mm-hmm.
before the Sith eventually rise up and take
Mm-hmm.
over, it I'm really intrigued at like how they decide to lay out this story, however long it goes, in terms of what leads to not only the Senate feeling a certain type of way, but then at some point somebody like a Palpatine being able to rise up within their ranks
Mm-hmm.
and really have them at odds because at this point, with not only losing so many folks in the last episode, but kind of like having a fractured core at really
Mm-hmm.
what the helm of the Jedi is at this moment. What we get to close this season, and as we find out more about Kamir and his master and everything that goes there, like this has no good ending,
No.
and this on top of that, for it to continue to occur for years and years and years going forward, it does feel like there's gonna be a portion of cover up because there isn't anything that tells you that the Jedi
Mhm.
really know and are aware of how
No.
many Sith there
No, they're
are, and
definitely not.
right. So like how they get there, and again, credit to Leslie and the writing team to this point, they've given us enough now
Yeah.
where however these two episodes end,
Mhm.
like I'm really excited. I'm excited for what this show has proven
Mhm.
so far after a start where a couple of episodes ago you and I were questioning. We were like
Yeah.
curious, like where was this going to go?
Mhm.
Now it feels like we have a very straight line,
Yeah.
and now we can just focus on the characters and be more interested in where they play this out.
Because the thing is, and beyond like just I most of the time when I talk about people caring about the canon, this, that, or the other, I'm making fun of them. But if I can take like an actual, I think so much the reason why I kind of take issue or with it is less that like, oh, I think they're dumb nerds and they care too much or whatever. It's like I do a fucking podcast about Marvel movies. I can,
Hmm.
my movie trivia brain is so I caring a lot about something is not something I normally make fun of. I think the thing that I just don't understand about them in
Hmm.
this regard is that like their whole thing is like, how can there be a Sith in 100 years before the Phantom Menace, but the Jedi Council says there haven't been Sith in thousands of years, and they're like that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, my response is, I think that if both of those things are, if the Jedi Council does believe this, and that there is a Sith 100 years from now, the the story of how that is very interesting. Like I think that like
Absolutely.
the I, whenever canon seems to contradict itself, I think that that is where you can have some of the most interesting stories. Where it's like, it is absolutely true that Yoda believes in his heart of hearts that there have been no Sith in hundreds of years, and it is absolutely true that 100 years ago there was a Sith. And so the events that have to happen in order to make both of those things true is what makes the pitch on this show so compelling. And that's why I get frustrated when people are like, "How did this like?" No, 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 no. You have to understand that like great stories come from where there seems to be a contradiction, because events like this are where you get the contradictions of simultaneously there have been no Sith, but there were a Sith, and like that's how Palpatine rose up, et cetera, et cetera. Like I think that that's really the thing that makes it just so fascinating is and knowing that I think this is a perfect like distance from any other Star Wars material, because we obviously don't know what's going to happen to any of these individual characters because none of
Right.
them are alive or even like close to being alive in the prequels. But at the same time, like we know on some level, like
Well, the impact
we
is
see
going to
the
be.
impact exactly. So like we don't know, nothing's being spoiled for us of how these characters are gonna. But like it's like we know on some level that this can't end with a full resolution because the echoes of this keep echoing until they take over the Galactic Senate.
I will say this, and I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but I think Star Wars needed this.
Yeah.
Star Wars definitely. desperately needed something like this. I think they had, with the way they have constructed their shows
Mhm.
and the movies we're supposed to get,
Mhm.
they were turning into kind of like a MCU light
Mhm.
where we're trying to connect a lot of things.
Mhm.
And I get it to a degree. There's a lot of characters we want to see. I know the Boba
Mhm.
Fett thing interested folks, and obviously Mando and Grogu.
Mhm.
Great first two seasons. The third season, I didn't hate it as much as other people
No.
did because I think folks kind of like lost the plot a little bit with the dark saber stuff
Yeah.
and just people getting mad that they put Lizzo and Jack Black in an episode.
Mhm.
It's like it's not that
Yeah,
big
who
of a
gives a
deal.
shit? It's Star Wars.
I mean, that's what I'm saying, man. But
They're
I
jack
think
all jizz. I'm just like I just I really can't. I'm sorry. There's just it's the
I
fish
was
people.
laughing
The
when folks
fish
people
people
really
are
be
called
mad.
Mon Calamari. I just don't really understand what people are being. There are fantasy series that you can be this serious about. Like if you want to be this serious about like the Wheel
Yeah.
of Time, go for it. But like
Wow. I just like, man, it's all right, man. It's not the biggest deal in the world
no.
that these folks show up for
Yeah,
one
you didn't like it
episode.
because Lizzo was in it. I didn't like it because it wasn't that good of an episode.
Right, exactly. But yeah, nonetheless, like Star Wars has gotten to this point where I think even they probably know to a degree that there are certain things. And I think I mean, something like Ahsoka, I mean, you and I don't have the emotional connection
Yeah.
to it that other folks do with the animated series.
Mhm.
I like the season better than most folks did.
Mhm.
For different reasons, just because I kind of look forward to this
Mhm.
Thrawn character and what they do there. But nonetheless, I
Mhm.
think we've talked about ambition. We talked about different attacking stories differently. It is this show is very
Yeah.
refreshing. It just feels different,
It
and I think that's
yeah.
important.
It feels like they've been trying to just paint around the you know, it feels like they have like a house and they keep building new additions onto it to like to make new series or like or putting in an extra closet here like next to the room that is episode 6 or and, but eventually like you can't keep eventually it just makes sense to build another house on the property. Like this is like instead of trying to build like a this is a pretty dumb metaphor, but like instead of trying to build like an addition or split a room
Yeah.
into two, they just built a guest house on the property. It's 100 years away. That like
Mhm.
they're not as burdened. They don't need to connect it to the foundation of everything else. It's just like it just opens up so much more avenues for them, and it's not as complicated by what's come before. And I think that like the thing that, and I know I've talked about it ad nauseum, but the thing that I find most upsetting about the decision to make Rey a Palpatine is because I think the thing that Star Wars has really dropped the ball on post George Lucas is the fact that it is a galaxy far, far away. It is massive. There are massive amounts of planets. There are a million different alien species. It's in this story like Star Wars. There have been books and expanded universe stuff for thousands of years. And
Mhm.
it's like the potential of that has been a thing that's always been there. And the insistence, I mean, like, no, it's actually only really about like 3 planets and 12 people is like, that's fine for like that does make for an interesting saga. But if you're going to do stuff outside of that, it's like, I'm much more interested in seeing in the sandbox of the Star Wars universe things that are like vaguely tangentially connected because that is like it's such a gigantic sandbox and it's like stop playing in this one corner for once. Like we can go back there. I think that there's interesting stuff there. I have a lot of memories there,
Yeah.
but the insistence on like no, everything must be related to this corner of the sandbox. It's like then why have a galaxy with thousands of planets and different
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I feel like this show should be a template for obviously you don't want to copy stuff, but I think in the sense of, oh shit, we don't have to do same old Emperor this and same old
Yeah.
upstart Jedi that. We
Hmm.
could tell stories with, I mean, you could do something different with bounty hunters. You could do
Yeah.
something different. I'm interested in what the skeleton crew show is gonna be with
Hmm.
the kids. Like, I mean, is it just gonna be a bunch of plucky kids? Are they gonna
Yeah.
be plucky kids in Jude Law? Like we'll
Honestly,
see.
that's not a bad formula. There's really, also, frankly, there's not a lot of things you can put before and Jude Law that I'm not a little bit intrigued.
So yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with that too. So I think it's it's been fun over these past 6 weeks
Yeah,
so far
yeah.
to go over this show and
And you
try
know
and
what?
figure.
It's been really refreshing too. Not to interrupt you,
Yeah,
is like
go
it's
ahead.
just so refreshing to hear Leslie Headland just speak openly and about these things. And like it really, I think it's just like
There's no cloak and dagger.
exactly. And I think that it is one as a creative person is really like nice. I don't need to read between the lines. It's like, and I think that it's really enhanced my understanding of the show. And I think a lot of creative people, like obviously you don't want to spoil anything. And I think I understand on some level, like if you're telling like, complex movies, if you're, David Lynch or whatever, you don't want to explain what you're
Hmm.
doing. But like in these, I think in a universe that it feels so shared by people, I think that it is very inviting for the way that she's basically letting people in and
Yes.
not being, cagey about it, not being like, oh, who knows? It's like it really feels like that that she's not trying to recreate the mystique of George Lucas of like this just can't. It's like no, this is like I am a fellow Star Wars fan, and this is my interpretation, and this is how I'm putting things out there, and I want you to be able to understand, how we got there because I have the same frame of knowledge as you. I've read the same High Republic books as you. Like I'm really, and it's really refreshing. I knew no one wants to hear his name, but it reminds me a lot. I mean, she's friends with him, so it reminds me a lot of the way Ryan Johnson was about Star Wars. And I really, it makes me happy whenever people with these big properties are like, they take away some of the mystique. It's like, no, 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 this wasn't made by magic. These were people in a room. We wrote it. We had discussions. We had actors. Like it's been really cool to read her interviews because it really helped me. It really has made me enjoy the show more, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, in reading her interviews, this is a very in intentional person in
Mm,
terms of like what type of story they want to tell, and then on top of that, they tell a good fucking story.
yeah,
So like that helps too, more
yeah,
so than anything else. So it's gonna be exciting to see what these last two episodes
yep.
bring. It should be fascinating. Looking forward to it.
Can I
And
just quickly shout out Basil?
oh yeah, sure, sure,
Just
sure.
shouts to him. I just love a little good little guy, because I think he knows it. He tells that it's
He
not.
was literally sniffing around.
He's like, you don't smell the same. I also think it's really, how she treats the droid differently. Like that's, I think,
Oh yeah, put them factory settings on.
that's fucked up, man. Because if you think about droids having sentience, she basically wiped his memory, which is like that's like not great. Now, of course, you don't want to think about droids having sentience because all of the morality of Star Wars falls apart if they do have sentience. Because it's like no one treats droids well except for fucking Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Solo.
Yeah, and yeah. And yeah, I think you know what the last thing I'll add about the show. I think there's a lot of focus on the end of the episode and how that was actually so cool when she
Yeah,
puts on the helmet and
yeah.
just breathes. It's almost kind of like
Mm-hmm.
a little Vader
Yep.
type thing. But I don't know how May's story is going to go, and
No.
I love the fact that I don't know
Yeah.
because they could do a lot of different things with it. So again, the show is intriguing to us. We're looking forward to the next two episodes and see
Mhm.
how it closes. And yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So Jake, with that being said, where can we follow you, my friend?
You can follow me at the J Christie. Please listen to my other podcast, Love at First Sight, where me and Andre Barrera are talking about psych.
Wonderful. And you can follow me on Twitter at Anthony Canton _3. Follow the show at MC University Pod on all platforms. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like I said, like, follow, comment. If you have any thoughts on the show, tweet at us. Tweet at the show at MC University
Mm-hmm.
Pod. Let us know what you think of the Acolyte to this point. And the Patreon, I can't sell it enough. This month we will. I know there's a couple of people who asked, like, are you guys doing the boys? Are you going to talk about the boys? Don't worry, when the
Yep.
season ends,
Yep.
we will have a review on Patreon. You will get a full season review. I have a lot of thoughts on this show
Yep.
and where it's going, and how it fascinates us, and yeah, everything that we've had with between Mission Impossible, what we're going to choose next. We're going to ask our patrons to let us know what franchise they want us to
Mm-hmm.
tackle, amongst other things. Should be very exciting. Thank you for everybody for supporting and listening. For Jake Christie, I am Anthony Canton III. This has been Marvel Cinematic University, and we will talk to you next time.